Okay, folks, welcome to this fabulous forum here that we're putting on with Our Revolution Pennsylvania. We have some amazing guests, and I'm going to start hitting record.
Recording in progress.
Okay. Welcome to Our Revolution Pennsylvania. This is a panel discussion today that we're having on the absolutely important question of critical race theory and how we need to understand what it is that we're talking about and understand the issues that revolve and how they connect to our larger Justice for All agenda at Our Revolution Pennsylvania. Today we have terrific guests, Josh Laird, Adams County School Board. We've got Tamara Anderson, Racial Justice Organizing Committee, Brian Sims, PA Rep from the 182nd, Maurice Baynard from University of the Arts. My name is Chuck Pinocchio, co-founder and co-facilitator of Our Revolution Pennsylvania. We were founded back in August of 2016, coming out of the Bernie Sanders presidential campaign. And at that time, we committed ourselves to building around issues, organizing and developing strategies for victory. And that's precisely what this forum today is about, is building out that capacity as well as knowledge so that we can carry forward the work that we're doing, again, on issues of racial justice and other social justice issues. So I'm going to turn it over right now to Hal Ginsberg from National Our Revolution. Hal?
I think you may be muted.
All right, there we go. Yep, that's it. I was so busy telling everyone else what to do, I forgot what I was supposed to do, and one of those things is unmute myself, so I apologize for that, folks. It is great to be here in Pennsylvania working with this outstanding group, and we'll talk a little bit more about what they're doing in just a moment. I do want to ask folks, if you can become a movement builder. To do this work does require money, and to put together these forums with great speakers, we do have some expenses. So if you possibly can, we do ask you to become a movement builder. I'll go ahead and put that link in the chat. I want to tell you just a little bit about what we're doing before we get into the meat of this really important forum about critical race theory, demystifying it, understanding it. We have been fighting for progressive champions throughout our 5 years in existence since Bernie Sanders created our organization. We were in Ohio. We had a disappointing result. We're really, we're licking our wounds. We wanted badly Senator Nina Turner to win. We fought hard. We worked with AOC. We, of course, worked with Senator Nina. We're going right back into it. We're going to elect progressive champions. The battle is continuing. It is not over by any means. And we came very, very close to unseating a corporate Dem in a really relatively conservative district in Ohio. So we are excited about the future, of course. There's our theory of change. Those are the most important issues to you: voting rights, healthcare, climate change, taxing the rich, good jobs, and we are working on those. There is healthcare. That is Our Revolution Pennsylvania organization in Scranton, fighting for progressive change. Just a week ago, yesterday, July 30th, led by Kristen Volchansky. She's on this call. Karen Hollis also on this call, working with Senator Casey to expand Medicare. We'll hear a little bit more about that in today's program. We are fighting to keep it in the ground, end fossil fuel subsidies. And by the way, if you would like to join us in that fight, we do have a couple of links. ourrev.us/no subsidies. That is to keep it in the ground. No subsidies for the polluters, for the fossil fuel industry. We're fighting to end the filibuster. There's no way we're going to make progressive change in this country if we don't end the filibuster, or at least reform it seriously, because it's just too easy for a minority to stop progressive change. And that is going to do it with my segment. One more time, you see it on the screen. There's the link, ourrev.us/PA-MEM. That shows it's a Pennsylvania member. And now let me turn it over to our moderators, today's hosts, Jeff Kennedy and Kristen Volchansky. Good morning, Jeff and Kit.
Everyone, and thank you so much for joining us and taking some time to be with us on a sunny Saturday. My name is Kristen Volchansky. I'm a member and organizer for Our Revolution Pennsylvania, and Jeff Kennedy is also on the call. He's also a member of Our Revolution. It's a political strategist and the host of the Kennedy Effect. So today we're going to be hosting a forum to discuss critical race theories and the serious topic of how to respond to the fears and distortions that have been generated and are being expressed by people around the state and around the country. So we're very glad and appreciative to have joining with us a very diverse panel to speak on this issue. First, we have Representative Brian Sims. He is a state rep for the House District of the 182nd. That's in the Philadelphia area. He's currently a candidate for lieutenant governor. He is also an attorney with a background in civil rights advocacy. We also have joining us Maurice Baynard, who is a professor and the director of diversity, equity, and inclusion at the University of the Arts in Philadelphia. He is also the senior lecturer for critical studies. Tamara Anderson is an advocate for racial justice and is on the organizing committee for racial justice. She is also the lead producer for a film and media production group called, the Gumbo Lab, which I love. So thank you so much for joining us, Tamara. And lastly, we have a lovely gentleman named Josh Laird. Josh is a school board member in Adams County. He is also a firefighter and fire chief. He is the father of 2 school children in the district, a high schooler and middle schooler, and he is also a former Republican. So thank you very much to our guests. Thank you so much for joining us. First, I think we can start with, if we can go back a slide, how just a definition of what critical race theory is and what it is not. This is from an article that is actually borrows that title from Yes Magazine, and it was a interview and background on critical race theory. Critical race theory essentially is a legal theory that uses critical legal theory, and it seeks to grapple with the way in which discrimination and bigotry has historically been shaped by racial oppression within our laws and legal fabric through the state. It is not primarily concerned with the interactions between individuals. It is concerned with how racism and discrimination becomes codified into our legal system. It's a theory that was developed by Kimberly Crenshaw and Derek Bell. So if you're looking to better understand what this is and how this controversy has evolved, how it has been picked up and used by right-wing operatives for alternative motives, we have created a research library. We will put that link in the chat. That link also includes some messaging guides that have been developed by various groups who are advocating for teaching the truth to our students and to our children. With that said, I'll open up the forum to our guests and I'll allow them to introduce themselves, and we'll begin the forum. So let's start with Representative Sims.
Hi, thank you, Kristen, and thank you to Our Revolution, and thank you to Jeff as well. You really covered my introduction pretty well. I'm a civil rights attorney by trade. I'm the son of 2 retired lieutenant colonels in the Army. Moved to Pennsylvania in my teenage years and became a civil rights attorney. Moved back to Philadelphia to practice, and just about 10 years ago became the first openly LGBTQ member of the Pennsylvania General Assembly in its at the time 247-year history. My time in office has really focused on what I knew in law and what I've lived. I focused my legislation on women's and reproductive rights, racial and ethnic justice, LGBTQ civil rights, criminal justice reform, and the issues of the environment. As you noted, I'm running for lieutenant governor at the moment, and this part of the impetus for this discussion is, as was pointed out by Kristen in the introduction, conservative members of the Pennsylvania General Assembly and sort of this copycat effort to gain some of the notoriety that some of the other bad actors who've pursued critical race theory laws have gained. We're really just trying to parrot what others have done, and so it's come up in the Pennsylvania General Assembly. We'll have time to get to that, but I'm grateful for the panel, grateful for the experts. They're going to have an opportunity to talk about this in the critical and substantive way that my colleagues will not.
And next we'll go to Professor Bernard. As mentioned before, Mr. Bernard is the Director for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at the University of the Arts.
Kristen, thank you. Good morning to everyone. I'd like to thank our Revolution PA, Kristen, my good friend Chuck Pinocchio, for having me this morning. I am a proud South Phillian, born and raised. More formally, I'm a scientist, neuroscientist by training, and I spend a lot of my time thinking about how brains work and how they don't work when things go awry. And hopefully we'll be able to bring a little bit of that logic to this discussion. As you guys heard, I've recently sort of changed hats. I focus now on issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion, specifically in large institutions, my institution at the University of the Arts, but also among some other institutions here in the city. And I think it's apt this morning to have a vigorous discussion about how we think about the evolution of institutions and America in this experiment, given the fact that we've had sort of a sordid past. And can we accomplish the goals that we have set for ourselves in the future without really interrogating and investigating where we've been and ask the questions about how does that then impact who we are today. And so I look forward to the discussion and hearing more from my colleagues. Thanks.
And next, Ms. Anderson.
Sorry, let me unmute myself. Good morning. And so I'm happy to be here. Also, I should add to that introduction that I'm currently also one of the core organizers for Zen Education Project for the Teach the Truth Coalition. So we are actually, I'll talk more about that. Like when we get to it, I'll put some information in the chat. We have syllabus that Zen Education has developed specifically for that, how to empower educators to teach op-eds and things like that. And also as a college professor who also teaches urban education at Westchester University and education and democracy, I am constantly challenging my students who are about to be teachers, most of them, to really look at, I like to call, America is like this emerging experiment, right? It is an emerging democracy. It is, it always gets very close, but then there is some pushback. And so looking at, and this is just an example of what that pushback looks like, Kimberly Crenshaw and AAPF have been really excellent in charting the historical milestones that we have seen almost markedly when the country moves forward and how it kind of rises up against that. So I'm excited to be here and thank you so much.
Absolutely, thank you. And then we also have Josh Laird.
Good morning, everyone. Wow, it's going to be hard to follow those guys. Anyhow, I am Josh Laird. I do have to apologize for the picture. Didn't realize it would be such a big thing. My kids saw it and had a fit. But I am on the school board here in Adams County. As the bio said, I am a firefighter. Been for about 30 years, which and I grew up here in South Central Pennsylvania. Arguably, Alabama, Pennsylvania. Everybody's a conservative. I am a recovering Republican, so try not to hold that against me. As toward critical race theory, I think it's a lot like, I think the Republicans have played this very well, at least so far. I had heard rumblings of it, but it wasn't until after the primaries that we started seeing it in our school board meetings. And we are seeing it in the school board meetings now. And you folks who have put in the chat room that you're on the school board, if you haven't seen it yet, you're going to. So this is a very timely forum. And I definitely look forward to getting some talking points, because it's starting to get pretty aggressive. And I think that's how it's going to continue, at least until the fall. So thanks for having me, and I can't wait to see what we can talk about.
So jumping right in and bridging off of what Josh just said, there are definitely motives for the people who are Republican operatives who started this movement, but for the people who are just average, everyday people who are expressing these concerns, I was wondering, what is your perception of what they are fearful about?
I'll jump in. I think they're afraid of differences. This goes back to when I went to school. There were 2 African Americans in my entire high school. It was just something that we weren't diversified. We didn't have to be. And I think they're just scared. I think they're listening to people on the national level. And I think at this point, they're willing to do anything they can to win, because they know in their heart they're right. And it doesn't matter if they discriminate against other people. That's just my 2 cents.
Kristen, I've been fearing this question all week, knowing that we were going to sit on this panel. And what I mean by that is, so the real question is the fear that we see in these videos of town halls, is it primarily social and about race? Is it primarily political and about one-upsmanship and brinksmanship? Or is it about economics, right? Is it someone somewhere pulling the strings of people who have less to gain an advantage and to maintain their stuff? And in thinking about it, I think it's all 3, right? It's all of those things are alive and well at the same time. And that makes it really, really difficult. Because many times we're apples and oranges, right? We think we're talking about a social issue where really the animating force is an economic one. Or we think we're talking about politics. But what we're really talking about here is the ongoing racial imbalance here in the country. And so the reason I say I feared this question is, as a person who's African American, we get asked a lot things like, what's up with all these people in critical race theory? Which, when I hear that, the question I think people are asking me is, what's up with the crazy whites? And I gotta be honest, I don't have an answer for that. But I do know 3 things, and I'll shut up after these, that there are sort of founding motivators in our democracy. One is that we love to create a boogeyman and use fear as a motivator. Whenever we are ready to move the masses, we couch it as fear. 2, we are really good at forgiving our own atrocities really, really quickly. And 3, just as a group, as Americans in general, but white Americans specifically, they love to join ranks when it looks like their stuff is threatened. And I think all 3 of those are at play right now. And we can talk about any one of them as sort of key, foundational to what we see on YouTube and on the news.
Kristen, if I can.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm so sorry. I want to say too that it's also difficult to have the conversation because we have centuries and decades of miseducation. So you also have individuals who have very little vocabulary or like historical things to look to. So it looks like this is brand new. When our reality, because of the fact that we live in a country that is very based upon systemic racism and systemic issues, class, economics, education, fear, those things are all extrapolated upon each other. And I dare say that education has always been a space of political practice. You know, Bell Hooks said it best in most of her research, and we look at culturally relevant pedagogy by Gloria Ladson-Billings. They speak a lot about how curriculum is political. Curriculum is literally created to teach students a certain thing because we want them to interact a certain way in our society. And this still goes back, because we even look at and this is very much connected to voter suppression and civil actions on the state level and on a national level. You know, when you hear, I think the CRT, the machine has like these sound bites kind of ready to go, right? So we see parents crying. So we see that that's an emotional, empathetic thing or we also see people, despite what's happening in Pennsylvania. I have several teachers in rural school communities who've already told me this conversation is coming up in their school boards, right? Superintendents are sending letters to their teachers already. So the the ball is moving ahead, whether something is coalesced into law or not, because fear itself is based upon change. It's also very much connected to the change in demographics in our country, right? There is something to be said when a perceived majority, because we believe in the racial construct that actually does not exist. Like it's not, it's not based on anything scientific or anthropological, but because everything we have in the US is basically embedded into that belief system, then these things are connected to it. And so of course you have fear. It's almost like when somebody pushes, you're a small child, you're playing the sandbox, you're having a good time, and somebody pushes you out of the sandbox and takes over your sandbox. You respond in a very visceral way. And so we have seen this happen time and time again. But because we don't teach about Reconstruction, because we don't teach about busing, because we don't teach about Brown v. Board, because we don't allow our students to really see these things in K through 12, then what happens is a lot of times when you're having these conversations on both sides, I feel like it's a brand new conversation for them. And so it requires to kind of approach it where you're educating people, but also guiding them along the process to hopefully make a critical decision for themselves. Thanks.
Kristen, I try to, and not only to echo what's been said before me, but to sort of get back to what part of the reason you asked Josh this question is, what do white people fear? What do people fear? It's white people. And what do white people fear? I think white people are using this as a hook to tell you they fear that somehow white kids will, in being taught about the massive racial inequities and injustices in our country's history, will then realize that the systems built upon that history must inherently be racist as well, and somehow feel guilt or shame that they are existing in a racist society which they benefit. And that's a good thing. I get asked all the time, what can white people do to combat this misinformation about critical race theory? And the quick question is that maybe stop telling your friends of color that you understand it and start explaining it to your white friends. This idea, I've seen this introduced in the legislature, and it touched on all three things that Maurice mentioned at the beginning of this. It is about racism, it is about classism, it is about the economy. Pardon me. And it is very much about utilizing this as a political tool. In the same way that marriage equality was used as a wedge issue, in the way that attacks on trans people in bathrooms has been used as a wedge issue. But because it is so inherently racist, it's impossible to divorce it from what Tamara was talking about, and that's the lack of a lexicon that people have for this. We don't teach our racial history, let alone the building blocks to have a critical understanding and analysis of that. This is as much an attack on critical thinking on all levels as it is an attack on the sort of reality of the racial and ethnic injustice of our history.
Mm-hmm. And I believe Rebecca had a question. Rebecca, did you want to ask your question?
I just wanted to ask the panel, what I've heard is a lot of talk about playing to the worst of people's fears and prejudice for a political advantage. And I just want to know, I'm running for school board again. I see this as a direct attack on my platform, for like the recent DEI director that we've put in place at my school board. And I'm wondering like what I can do to help the community see that their fears and prejudice, that there's a line between where you express your fear and you start to show your prejudice.
I can only say, from my perspective, I do some communications work on messaging on issues like this. And what I often see is that conservatives and Democrats talk past one another. That Democrats, when they speak on a political issue, they speak collectively. They speak about the plural. When Republicans speak about any issue, they speak on the individual level, and they fuse the issue and their sense of self. And sometimes I think to be effective and to break through that, while it's definitely true that in this case, what is being purported is a distortion of this theory, and it is trying to whitewash or make invisible, racism and its historic presence and its continuing presence. What the conservative voter is hearing is, you're telling me that I'm a racist. You're telling me that I'm a bigot. And I think the challenge for us is to try to separate the two and to open up the space between what this theory is and the idea that every child sitting in a classroom, no matter their background or skin color or religion, should be treated equally. And most people of good faith have no problem with that. But what the right has successfully done is fused this concept of your self-worth and your goodness with what they're twisting into an attack on American culture. I don't know if that in any way answers your question at all. So.
Thank you.
Well, and I'd like to jump in here quick with that too. I don't know if this will help in your race. It's certainly not going to help in mine. I have no doubt I'm going to get beat in the fall by someone who I didn't see coming, who is actually one standing up now, pounding his chest about critical race theory. And they've actually used, and I haven't seen it nationally used yet, but it was shielded in a anti-racism rant that this guy went on, where he wanted us to stand up as a board and openly admit that we would be anti-racist to all races. We knew where he was going with it because he had spoke on critical race theory the meeting before, but he is trying to shift it back to the, anti-white. We're now swinging the pendulum back and being racist to white people. Mm-hmm. I think back to the other issues. I'll flash back, 35 years when I was in high school. The curriculum that we learned is, and this was a real soul searcher for me because I didn't understand. We were taught that the Battle of Gettysburg was about shoes. We were taught that the entire Civil War was completely and totally states' rights and that slavery didn't come in until the end. In my civics class, we never read anything from Dr. King. It wasn't until actually like 3 weeks ago in a college class, I read the letter from Birmingham jail. That should be in every high school. And it was intentionally omitted. All of the civil rights were intentionally omitted from my high school learning. And now looking back, I see why. And I don't know how we get past that, but I think that we're having the conversation. It's a good place to start. I don't know if that helps at all, but I've done a lot of soul searching recently, and this is actually pretty timely.
And you know what? I'm sorry to jump in, but I just wrote it in the chat too. It also kills me because the Letter Birmingham Jail is on the Pennsylvania Department of Education reading list for American history. So there's also this fact that the state has actually created a curriculum. Is it perfect? No, most curriculums are imperfect, but there's lots of things in there that bills and laws, the conversations, like some of the counter might help, especially in school boards, to point to just go to the department state curriculum page and see like it includes arts and a robust art. Like a lot of people don't realize the Department of Education actually wants kids to take theater and dance and all these other things, not just art and music. In American history, it goes under the Civil War, the Civil Rights Movement, and things like that. So there are lots of counters and information, and I included also a syllabus in the chat for those who might want some talking points. I find that when people are up here and are vitriolic and are banging their chest, it helps to like present them with actual tangible things, right? Like these, like everybody, I know most schools offer AP history. I score AP exams, AP seminar exam and the history exam. I don't know how anybody's going to pass the exam next year if they change the curriculum, because like just this year, Woodrow Wilson's speech was included, Warmth of Other Suns from Isabel Wilkerson, James Baldwin, Invisible. Like these are things that are included on like advanced placement exams also, which are given across the country. So I just want to say that too.
That's actually a great point. Really great point. Sorry, Representative Sims.
I wanted to ask Maurice a question, and it sort of stemmed from something, Kristen, you were talking about earlier, in the different ways that people hear things, that the sort of the same messages from different sides. You as you mentioned earlier, you get asked a lot about critical race theory, and I think half the time you want to stop and say, you don't even realize that's not a curriculum that is taught in K through 12 schools. And even if it is a theory that is used in academia, there's a First Amendment right. It'd be unconstitutional to ban it in academia. And so you want to grab these people by the shoulders and say, you don't even understand the concept which has been utilized to attack your frustrations and sort of take your energies. Why is it that even though critical race theory is not an attack on that individual, that me, and not only in any iteration of it, not in a real world application of it, and yet that person has still been told that if this education is allowed, you're being taught as a racist, even though that is not factually accurate? Why do people continue to hang their hat on a hook that has been taken from them, that isn't legitimate?
Right. I wish I had a good answer for you, Brian. The thing that sort of most comes to mind is that I know a lot of times we say that we live in two different Americas, that there are two different approaches to the way we think about ourselves. As Kristen sort of mentioned, there are those of us who kind of talk in a collective we, and then there are those who see that America is really about amplifying one person and your personal rights. I think another way to slice the American pie is it a religion or is it a scientific undertaking? And what I mean by that is there's a fundamental Americanist story that we like to tell ourselves, that nobody's ever gotten hurt because of American expansionism, that we're fundamentally good, that if we did do a few bad things, there were a few bad actors that weren't part of the general American narrative. And that goes as far as slavery, right? So that's the story of a few crazy people in the South, but not the America that is ever ascendant and ever rising. And we believe that story. We like that story. It makes us feel good. I read in the chat someone who said that that the people that you see who are really afraid of not understanding that we've had some problems in the past, but we've had some victories and we're getting better. I would argue that that too is part of this America is essentially good argument. I think there's another way to think about America, and that is it's Bayesian. And what I mean by that is it gets updated with new information. It's not religion, it's science. By very definition, the way in which we thought about ourselves 50 years ago is going to be really different because we have so much better tools, so much better thinking, and so much more information today than we had then. We've had distance and more scholarship. And I think what we have is a lot of science folks trying to talk to religious folks. I use those in quotes, right? And so they think if we fundamentally change the prerequisites, then America no longer exists. While progressives are saying, no, we need to keep recreating it. And even the America that we have today, 50 years from now, we're going to be ashamed to say that we believe and had some of the conversations that we're having.
Tamara, you sort of used that exact same language when you said that the people who were asking to address this they lack the tools, they lack the language, the lexicon, because we didn't even give them the basic education to understand difference to begin with.
Right. I mean, we just had a textbook that came out 2 years ago that said that enslaved people were forced immigrants. So we, that book came out of it was circulating, it was out in social studies, right? I think just like Maurice said, I think the problem, and people say this about education has often tried to side itself with psychology, when our reality is actually very anthropological. It's more anthropological. It's more about how systems interact with each other. And if you don't understand what part of the system you're in, you have a tendency to, I like to say, fall for the okie doke, right? So if I have no idea that there was a Southern mythology that was created by the Daughters of the Confederacy, like literally funded, that, put these Confederate statues up, created a curriculum, then I'm going to go through life and think, well, or like what Josh said, he was taught that slavery came later. If you look at the way plantation financial records were kept, they look very much like business records today. The fact that you could take a loan to buy a slave for 30 years, it doesn't sleep on me that that's the same life of a mortgage. The fact that we now have bankruptcy laws wasn't because of Wall Street. It was because of the crash of cotton in the 1800s. And President Van Buren wanted slave owners to have some sort of economic recoup. The fact that we have multiple banks, when the main bank was right here in Philadelphia, and people fought for multiple banks. Who fought for multiple banks? Slave owners fought for multiple banks. Where does that history go to? It goes right to the creation of Wall Street. The very way that we transact with each other is steeped on the bodies of people, right? The way that, the way the crops were set up, the fact that there is lots of African from Sierra Leone in South Carolina. We're like, why is that? Because in some places like Senegal and Sierra Leone, those are rice communities, right? So when we look at what was considered gold in South Carolina, their rice was considered gold. It's actually called that. It used to be called the South Carolinian Plantation Rice Company. And now we just call it South Carolinian rice. But that's what it used to be called before, right? So the whole thing is that if we continue, I'm exhausted of my students coming to me either in high school or in college and looking at me like, oh man, miss, this is the first time I ever heard any of this. And then it changes. You see them shift, because we also have this illusion that teaching these authentic histories is only for Black and brown children. Teaching these authentic histories is for all children. It helps them to become critical citizens. Who would you rather be voting for? People who just want to be led like sheep to the slaughter, or people who actually can ask questions and can challenge and can actually stand up for themselves, or even better, can take care of themselves because they can read the fine print in a terrible contract that's getting given to them, right? When we look at how wealth has been given, yes, there's a whole thing for middle-class whites and poor whites that are like, we didn't have any privilege. We didn't have this, because nobody taught them about redlining. Nobody literally taught them about the covenants that were put inside mortgages. My own grandmother, bought a house in the South Side of Chicago. When you look at her original deed, a white woman's name is on it who helped her purchase that home. So these are like, I'm not like 100 years old. That just happened, right? So these are the types of things that, you know, we kind of need to know. And I also think that, and don't get me wrong, I'm not under the illusion that education saves the world. Woo! Yeah, no, miss me on that one. I'm not, I don't believe that. But I do believe that having a foundation, having these types of conversation, it's difficult to really counter that. Because everything I just said, I didn't pull it out of some like conspiracy theory. It literally is like collected and collated on actual primary sources.
And I
So
think,
how do we, I'm sorry, go ahead.
oh, no. Go ahead, Representative Sims.
No, it was actually Josh. Sorry, I'm just gonna.
Oh, sorry.
But my question is, how do we get that out without people who look like me believing that it is an alternative history that has a political angle? How do we get the truth out? And again, I'll flash back to what I learned. I realize now that I was taught what I was taught for a specific purpose, to keep me in line for the rest of my life with the community that I was in, the conservative community. How do we get the truth in history out without looking like we're trying to, manipulate the white people?
I'll say one quick way is to change the decision makers, change the people that are trying to stop us from doing this. Josh, I'm listening to you, and you started this conversation by introducing yourself as a Republican, and I'm grinning ear to ear because you remind me of my family. My family are Republicans. They're educated. They're smart people. The idea that critical race theory is somehow an affront to who they are, or would somehow they would feel accused of something is ridiculous. And so the fact that you can understand that and they can understand means that it's understandable. A lot of this goes back to using this as a political chip, using this as a way to get people's frustrations and utilize those frustrations in gaining, controlling, maintaining power. So I think, in the last 4 years, we've elected more women, more people of color, more second generation immigrants, and more LGBTQ people to office than we did in the last 14 years. And that is one of the ways that we continue to change this. Somebody asked in the comments about where the status of this bill is in Pennsylvania. This bill was introduced by a guy named Russ Diamond. Russ Diamond, if any of you know him, will know him as the person that led the charge against masks. Russ Diamond had both his ex-wife and his ex-girlfriend have filed protection from abuse orders against this person. He introduced it in May, I think May 21st of this year. And for any of you that have had the displeasure of having to read or kind of muddle through the co-sponsorship memo, it's all about how dare schools teach inequality. To read the actual bill itself is fast. In fact, there's a line, forgive me for taking the moment, but there's a line that I think will shock most people. No Commonwealth, county, or municipal agent, school district, or public secondary institution shall use any funds to express, publish, advertise, or promote any racist or sexist comment. How would we even report on our criminal justice system? How would we even report on the history of our own government? It'd be impossible to. And the irony isn't lost on these people. I just think frankly the academics is. This bill is going to go nowhere. It was assigned in June to what's called the Education Committee. Pennsylvania is the last great gerrymandered legislature in America. And so, yes, these people are in control, but this isn't a bill that would ever survive, that would ever get past the governor's veto, for example. And this bill is going nowhere. It was done for the optics. The optics are really important because it is, anytime you see a white person in government expressing racism in this way, know that actual people are actually hurt, whether or not this bill becomes law or not. And I think that's really critically important to remember.
And I think your last point that actual people are actually hurt is important, because I've noticed that just growing up in a conservative area, that often that gets lost. They can tell themselves a narrative that this is just me standing up for what I believe. I'm not actually hurting anybody. I'm not saying somebody should get fired from their job because they, are Black or they're Latino or they're LGBTQ. I just believe these things. And so I think, to the earlier question, kind of cutting through that narrative, being able to point out, no, actually people are actually hurt, is vitally important. I see we have two questions. Bill Wood, who is, you have there that you're a storyteller, and then Chuck Panaccio.
Hi, thanks. This is Bill Wood. I'm a storyteller, but I'm also on the school board and running for election again. And I think really we have local control in Pennsylvania of school boards and of school districts. So at this stage, at the national, the state level is great, but change is going to happen at the local level by ensuring that school board members win their races. So I'd just like to make a couple suggestions with regards to all of that. First of all, I think trying to push back against critical race theory or even bringing it up is shadowboxing, because they've defined critical race theory as anything they feel like. It's diversity, equity, inclusion. It's social emotional learning. It's, fill in the blank. It's anything that may make somebody uncomfortable. So I think trying to fight back against it by saying this is what it really is, like I said, is shadowboxing. What we can do in a positive way is what school board members are supposed to do. We look at data. We identify where there are learning gaps. And it is our responsibility as school board members, once we identify learning gaps, to say, look at the whole person, the background of every individual, the racial background, the gender background, the whatever other background that brings to the table of those people. And using that data, say those historical discriminations, et cetera, may be playing a factor into those learning gaps, whether it's socioeconomic or anything else. And we have a responsibility as school board members to use that data and address the learning gaps. And that could include, changing our historical curriculum so that they have a greater sense of belonging, because when students belong, they do better. So we approach it from data, each individual school district looking at where their own learning gaps are and adjusting their policies and curriculum based on that local school district. From the flip side of it, if you want to win school board races, I think we paint them out for what they are. They've said they want to ban books, they want to police language, and they want body cameras on teachers with citizen review boards looking at every single thing that is said by teachers for some imagined racial something or other. Is that what we want in our school districts? Our teachers to be policed in that manner? I think for most districts are going to say no. There are probably some where, yes, that is what they want. But I think as a way to push back against it, you paint the picture of what it's going to look like if the other side gets control of our school boards. So that's what I have to say.
Thank you so much. I think that's a great point, putting the ball back in their court. Chuck, and then Karen.
Thanks, Kristen and Billy. That was great, and all the presenters. Brilliant top analysis of these questions. And I just wanted to maybe reframe or get us a way of thinking, conceptualizing what's going on in terms of what Drew Weston calls the political brain. The political brain is the emotional side of the brain that is easily trapped and is easily brought into these nonsensical conversations, but because of the ability of the right, especially, to play on people's sense of victimization, their sense of loss, their sense of betrayal, and the whole process of othering. Right, is it's us versus them, kind of a division. I call it divide, distract, and deny, and it's all wrapped with the culture wars, which I most succinctly identify coming out of the 1960s. I think the accomplishments of the civil rights movement in many ways set the table for where we are today, and the reaction. And frankly, I see us teetering into a state of fascism. It's a much larger question here, but I'd love to just get some responses to these notions then of the political brain, victimization, and then also just to throw out to folks a book title that I've been reading called Democracy in Chains. And it's really the game plan, it's the blueprint of what the right wing has done with culture wars to distract us from the more actual critical questions of it that Maurice pointed up earlier, that touch on people's day-to-day lives. So I'll stop there and see if folks on the panel might want to respond to some of these questions. Again, thank you.
I think you stumped them, Chuck.
No, I'd love to. I'd love to hear what some of my fellow panelists have to say to Chuck's proposal.
Yeah, no, I think it actually, so it's a machine, but I also believe that it is okay to say that systemic racism is at the center of the machine, because systemic racism, the definition of even white supremacy, is the intersectionality of it all, right? So we see trans laws happening, we see anti-trans, like we see all these bills coming across that we like to say are weapons of mass distraction, but they also can be an opportunity for us to miss these like original sins that America keeps collecting and not dealing with, right? It's almost like, how do you come up with a plan that is inclusive, but also respective of the fact that, yes, people are different. Yes, people have different opinions. Yes, we want different things for our families, but there are some basic things that I think people want. You know, we saw this a lot even around the argument back and forth around the Affordable Health Care Act. You know, individuals where it would have benefit them greatly to say yes to it, they were very like vitriolic about, oh, no, we can't have that. And so I think it is, right, like Lisa said in the chat, it's not a left or right, it's much deeper. But I also think it's also like always this idea of the chickens coming home to roost. You know, I think it's interesting how these conversations happen every 5 or 10 years, right? Like the same conversations, the same topics, the same kind of connections being made. And then some of us have these aha moments like, this is the answer. But if we go back to like various historical books that have been written, we will find that the answer has been very repetitive. So we have to ask ourselves, how do we define progress? And what does progress actually manifest and look like? Have we moved the needle tremendously? Or is the needle constantly, like the fact that you can look at the demands from the March on Washington and the Poor People's March, and you could put it into 2021 and say, oh, those are the same demands we have now. The fact that even in our own state right now, there's a huge case coming to court around funding, that at the center it's being said that it's race. It's like, it's a racist funding system. It has been said out loud. And now there's a case coming forward. Pennsylvania has one of the largest funding gaps in the country in how we fund education. And it's all based upon economics and like ethnicity, right? So we have to also, I think that's a way to look at it too. Like how do you define progress? You know, not to be like, oh, it's no hope. I'm just saying that I just don't think that we can ignore the historical thing. Even personally, when you're learning lessons about yourself, what's the first thing you do? You look backwards. So you don't repeat the same mistakes over and over again. So we have to ask ourselves as a country and as like a political force, are we repeating the same things? Are we learning new lessons? You know, what does that mean for any of us? And I don't really think I have the answer for that, but that is how, those are the constant things that I like grapple with too.
Thank you so much, Tamara. That was really impactful. Karen.
Yeah, hi. I'm Karen Hollis, leader of Our Revolution West Philadelphia Burbs, and I also teach critical race theory, among other courses, at Villanova University. And a couple of nights ago, I attended another forum about rhetorical ways of fighting this attack on critical race theory, which, you know, as many have said, it has expanded and grown into an attack really on anything progressive in the school system. And so one of the methods that people recommended at this forum was finding something that the other side and you can identify with. It can be very hard, but maybe, again, building on what Tamara was saying, feeling pride in the progress that we have made, and feeling very patriotic about that, the way, the right says they feel, and how, we've come such a long way, although we have ways to go, in our country, and that it's a democracy is a building process. So again, identifying with something that maybe will, in their eyes, make you seem less hostile. And then from that, you might bridge to a point like, we greatly appreciate these gains that we've made. But again, if we don't teach about these gains and about the problems that people overcame in terms of women's rights and gay rights and civil rights, et cetera, if we don't celebrate and learn about those problems that we solved, more sort of, we won't be able to make any progress in the future. And, to deny that our democratic project is finished is not going to be helpful to us at all. So again, they said, find a point of identity and be proud of what we've accomplished, but then show students and everyone how much further we have to go.
Thank you so much, Karen. Anyone on the panel, would you like to add anything or respond to what Karen said? No. Okay, I believe Lisa Longo had a question, and then we'll take last minute questions, and we will wrap up and do last minute thoughts. Lisa.
Great, thanks, Kit. So I'm going to start out with a comment and then go to my question. When I was on school board here in Phoenixville, and the students and I had a great relationship, one of our students came to me with a history book, and he said, Mrs. Longo, do you think the slaves were happy? And I said, no. Why are you asking me? And he said, there's a picture in this book of slaves smiling and dancing. And he said, and I just don't think that's how it really was. So my question for the panel is, how do we better vet our history books and curriculum? And I know there's many school board directors and candidates on this call. How do we help them to make sure we're not teaching such nonsense?
To me, that's a collaboration between the administration of the school and the school board. Because in the end, the school board does set the curricula, but it has to get recommendations from the administration. I think it needs to be upfront and honest, and have honest conversations about, that there isn't any garbage. Now, we don't get to see the books, we don't get to see all that stuff. We just get to see a list of curricula and some talking points and whatever else. But I think there needs to be a really good relationship. And I think those relationships are probably also strained. As much as I hate to say it, probably politically strained. It's a work in progress for sure.
Lisa, I don't have an answer directly to how we eject the quote unquote nonsense. But what I will take away from your story, and I'm going to steal your story if you don't mind, and retell it in other contexts, is that it was a student, it was a kid in contemporary America who gave sort of a critical eye to what they saw in this textbook. And I just want you to think how many adult hands that textbook passed through, how much review that picture, that illustration underwent, and how many professionals got paid before it ended up in the hands of that really critical thinker. And you have to ask yourself, how is it that it could have gotten past that many adults, professionals themselves? And I'm not suggesting that there's some cabal somewhere that's like, let's draw pictures of happy slaves. I'm suggesting that there's an America where you can present a picture of happy slaves and nobody's alarm bells go off, because it is so much a part of their conceptual DNA, that's not a problem. And so what we're really talking about is how do we update our software? Do you know what I'm saying? Such that we literally bring a different lens. The answer to your question is, yeah, we need more people with diverse eyes on everything before it hits our kids, or else we are going to end up generating yet another generation of kids with the same blind spots that we have.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to follow up that after this, I did ask for a textbook review, and I hope that, you know, we are being a little more thoughtful. But I love your point that it was a student. You know, it was not one of us who caught it. It was a student who brought it to me, and that's for our school board members and candidates on the call. Please stay tuned for the second part of this. I know we're going to wrap this up shortly, and we're going to go into a more detailed school-specific conversation, but I'm going to let Kit take it to the next part.
Yes, so thank you so much to all of our guests for joining us. This has been a great discussion.